Most people would call Much Ado About Nothing a light play about romance and life's harmless little deceptions. But beware. That description only works for one of this play's storylines. In Much Ado About Nothing, there are some deceptions that have a benign, even comedic outcome, like in the case of the hatred-turned-romance between Beatrice and Benedict. If you're a Pride and Prejudice fan, these two might remind you a little of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. Basically, Beatrice and Benedict spend the first part of this play insulting each other, but after a little trickery by their friends, they end up falling in love. Like I said, romance and harmless little deception. The problem is that the main storyline in this play, the one that prompts most of the action, is about a deception that's actually pretty horrible. See, a count named Claudio is all set to marry Beatrice's cousin, Hero, but after John the Bastard's dastardly scheme, Claudio finds Hero unfaithful and publicly shames her, and she's innocent! That's right, ladies. In this storyline, the woman takes it on the jaw. Now, to give Shakespeare some credit, everything turns out okay in the end, and there's even a little lesson for Shakespeare's audience. Here it is. Deception can be evil or harmless depending on the circumstances, so take note carefully and think before you judge. If you watched Recap 2, you heard Shakespeare's message about taking note and judging carefully. The fact that most of the characters in this play don't take note, or take note of the wrong things, makes for a classic Shakespearean plot. Count Claudio returns from battle, takes note of Leonato's daughter Hero, and falls in love. Meanwhile, John the Bastard takes note of the potential wedding and plots sabotage. In the week before the marriage, Claudio and his comrades decide to trick their friends Benedict and Beatrice into falling in love. Meanwhile, John the Bastard cooks up a scheme to make Hero appear unfaithful. Beatrice and Benedict take note of what their friends are saying, each believing that the other is in love. Meanwhile, John the Bastard's evil scheme works. Claudio takes note of two lovers in Hero's window. Thinking he's been betrayed, he vows to expose Hero's impurity. At the wedding, Claudio publicly condemns Hero, and Leonato, taking note, denounces his own daughter. The friar defends Hero's innocence and comes up with a scheme to win Claudio back: Hero's fake death. Claudio and Leonato take note, finally, of the truth when the conspirators in Don John's scheme are forced to reveal his evil plans. All ends happily when Beatrice and Benedict and Claudio and Hero take note of their true love, and a double wedding follows. In this play about deception, the players trick and are tricked. More on the deceivers and the deceived right after this. Let's start with Beatrice and Benedict, who spend most of the play being deceived. Beatrice is Leonato's niece and Hero's cousin. You'll remember her for her sassy comebacks and the fact that she doesn't care about guys. In the end, though, her friend's trickery gets her to fall in love with Benedict. Speaking of Benedict, the guy is a perfect match for Beatrice. He's always making jokes and dissing marriage. But his friends trick him into falling in love too. Hero and Claudio are the other main couple, and they both deceive and suffer the consequences of deception. Hero is Claudio's future wife, and her deception is innocent enough. She's the one who tricks Beatrice. But when she's the victim of deception, it nearly costs her her marriage and her life. Like Hero, Claudio participates in a deception to get his friend to fall in love. But deception ultimately hurts Claudio too. Deceived by vengeful John the Bastard, Claudio publicly shames Hero and nearly loses her. Thankfully, he's tricked into marrying her in the end. Speaking of John the Bastard, his deception of Claudio is the most vicious one in the whole play. As a result, he and his cohorts are the only ones not to have a happy ending. If you've watched the last few recaps, you know that almost everything that happens in Much Ado About Nothing is a result of systematic deception. Think all the trickery just makes for good drama? That's true, but it's also Shakespeare's main theme. How many deceptions did you count in this play?
Leonato is tricked into thinking Don Pedro is trying to steal Hero from Beatrice. Is actually in love with Benedict. Is actually in love with her. Claudio is tricked into believing that Hero has been unfaithful by Claudio is tricked into thinking Hero is dead. Into thinking he's going to marry Leonato's niece.
That's a lot. But Shakespeare's theme isn't just about taking note of deception. It's more about how you respond to deception. In Much Ado About Nothing, some of the deceptions are harmless, like the conversations which Benedict and Beatrice overhear and which make them fall in love with each other. On the other hand, the deception which calls Hero's innocence into question has nearly deadly results. In fact, Don John's whole deceptive scheme is downright evil. And even though Shakespeare doesn't pass judgment on deception, I think he wants you to. For the characters in this play, deception helps them achieve social status and success. But keep in mind that deception only ends happily when these same characters have judged it thoughtfully instead of just reacting to it. Maybe that means that Shakespeare's theme is a call to action. Think before you judge, and then judge each situation carefully and wisely. Are you having trouble understanding some of these characters' ornate language and fancy schmancy ways of speaking? That's not just Elizabethan English you're responding to. It's Shakespeare's second theme in action. I don't know about you, but reading Benedict, Claudio, and Don Pedro's speeches often got my tongue tied up in knots, not to mention my brain. That's because they all speak in the kind of colorful, witty banter that was standard for Renaissance courtiers. Their fanciful language was supposed to win over their love interests, even if it doesn't win you over. But Shakespeare isn't celebrating this approach to social interactions, he's making fun of it. You can tell because Claudio's desperate attempts to be the perfect courtier ultimately get him into trouble. Remember that in the beginning of the play, Claudio allows Don Pedro to woo Hero for him, only to find out that Don Pedro is trying to steal Hero for himself. Well, that doesn't turn out to be true, and good thing for Claudio, since he's more than ready to give up the girl to stay in Don Pedro's good favor. And then later, Claudio chooses his own social standing over finding out the truth about Hero. He's all too ready to forget love and publicly condemn her for something she didn't even do. So what's Shakespeare's second theme? It's the danger of giving up everything in the interest of social grace and appearances. Shakespeare gave you the key to his main motif just by writing the title of this play. Except in Shakespeare's day, Much Ado About Nothing had two pronunciations, and it's the second one that's important. We'll talk about Much Ado About Noting right after the break. If you watched Recap 3, you know that the plot of this play hinges on whether or not the characters take note of the various deceits, plots, conversations, and activities going on around them. Think about the way Hero and Ursula make careful conversation in Act 3, Scene 1. Everything about their discussion is set up to lure the eavesdropping Beatrice to take careful note, from the things they say about Benedict and Benedict's love for Beatrice to the comments they make about Beatrice and her disdain for Benedict. Hero is sure that the tidbits they offer are just juicy enough to make Beatrice pay attention and to fall in love with Benedict. But observation, eavesdropping, and spying aren't the only kind of taking note that happens in this play. There's also note-taking in the form of writing down thoughts of love, the way Beatrice and Benedict do at the end of the play. Ultimately, it's their notes on love, in the form of sonnets, that prove their affection for one another and that reinforce Much Ado About Nothing's main motif, taking note. Like many other aspects of this play, Shakespeare's second motif has two faces, one that's harmless and another that's nearly deadly. When we come back, we'll be talking about counterfeiting. In Much Ado About Nothing, we're not talking counterfeiting like the kind related to cranking out fake bucks. We're talking about counterfeiting of emotion or behavior with good or bad effects. Like in Act 2, Scene 3, when Benedict eavesdrops on a conversation in which Leonardo, Claudio, and Don Pedro pretend that Beatrice is in love with Benedict just so Benedict will fall in love with Beatrice. Don Pedro slyly suggests that maybe Beatrice's love isn't for real, but Leonardo says, "Counterfeit? There was never counterfeit of passion came so near the life of passion as she discovers it." In other words, Leonardo denies that Beatrice's love could be fake, even as he himself counterfeits her love to toy with Benedict's emotions. But while this counterfeiting is fairly harmless, the counterfeiting that appears in Act 4, Scene 1 has terrible effects. At their wedding altar, Claudio accuses Hero of counterfeiting her purity, and Hero nearly dies when almost everyone believes him. In both cases, the motif of counterfeiting reinforces one of this play's main themes, that deception is a two-sided coin, so beware, and think before you judge. It wouldn't be a proper Shakespeare play without a dramatic fake death scene, right? But in Much Ado About Nothing, Hero's death is more than just the climax of the play. It's also a symbol. Act 4, Scene 1. Poor Claudio's been tricked by John the Bastard into thinking that Hero has been unfaithful, and Claudio, prepared to defend his honor, confronts Hero and shames her publicly. At their wedding! No wonder Hero slumps lifelessly to the ground. In Shakespeare's time, an accusation of impurity was as good as a death sentence. It was a stain on the woman and on her entire family. Now, in Hero's case, of course, both the accusations and Hero's death proved to be deceptions. Hero doesn't really die any more than the scheme John the Bastard cooked up has any truth behind it. But Hero's death is still an important symbol. It represents a symbolic cleansing, and it offers Hero a way to regain her purity. After her death, she is reborn into a world where Claudio's accusations have been proved foundationless. By dying, Hero symbolically casts off her stained identity and replaces it with innocence. And this deception allows her to marry Claudio without baggage and to assure the world that her family's honor is intact. If you've been watching all along, you know that the characters in Much Ado About Nothing spend a lot of time taking note, sometimes with dangerous results. We'll talk about why you should take note of all they're taking note right after this. If I could sum up Much Ado About Nothing in one convenient little warning, this would be it. Don't believe everything you hear. Check this out. If Claudio hadn't fallen for Borachio's ruse with Margaret, Claudio never would have falsely accused Hero of being unfaithful. And if Hero's father, Leonardo, hadn't believed Claudio's public condemnation of Hero, Hero never would have suffered her father's wrath and the shame that could have stained her whole family. Do you see where I'm going with this? Yeah, I'm talking about gossip. Ugly rumors. Things that you hear about people in school that sound juicy and tantalizing, but probably don't have any truth behind them. In other words, don't believe everything you hear. Look, this isn't just a lecture about not gossiping. Shakespeare's play is about so much more than that. Think of it this way. In Much Ado, taking note of everything you hear without thinking it through for yourself leads to despair and death. But thoughtfulness, that's what brings about a happy ending for everyone.